Picture a facility that, on its surface, is outwardly indistinguishable from innumerable other metropolitan medical centers. It features a comparably austere facade and symmetrical rows of windows. A journey to its back, however, exposes a nondescript doorway, sealed and obstructed long ago. Past this particular threshold, a journey into the past begins. The air inside is thick and motionless, like molasses, infused with the odor of grime, aged medications, and something else, a faint, lingering scent of fear. Here, time is not a river that flows, but a solid, frozen expanse. Our route takes us down a long, echoing corridor. Every step reverberates off the peeling paint. Light filters in only from the grimy windows at the hallway's end, revealing overturned gurneys and stacks of yellowed medical charts from the gloom. The place we seek is labeled Ward B. Its door is not locked. A gentle push makes it open with a creak that feels sacrilegious in the profound silence. The scene inside is astonishing. This is not a place of slow decay, where nature and time gradually reclaim their territory. It is instead a scene frozen in a solitary moment, an image of calamity. For beds are in the room, all of them unmade. The sheets are in turmoil, as if their occupants leaped out just seconds earlier. Next to one bed, and 4 poles supports a half-empty saline bag. Its needle, ripped from an arm, lies discarded on the blanket. A broken plastic file is on the ground, and beside it, a magazine rests open, clearly being perused until the very moment of interruption. This scene suggests not abandonment, but an instantaneous cessation. It calls to mind actors fleeing a stage in the middle of a scene. Yet there was no fire, no earthquake. What force could make people escape with such speed, leaving behind their belongings, their medicines, and even each other? The answers to these questions, I am utterly convinced, are hidden in the details, in the objects remaining on the nightstands, waiting to be found. In any investigation, you start with physical clues. The grand mystery of Ward B is overwhelming, so we will focus on the smaller stories told by the items left behind. I approach the first nightstand, its surface coated in a film of fine, pale dust. A porcelain mug sits there, a blackened, hardened tea bag resting at its bottom. The tea is, of course, frigid, but the pronounced ring on the porcelain shows it was once full and hot. This was not a beverage put down to be finished later. It was abandoned mid-sip. A simple, mundane act, frozen in time, that speaks volumes about the urgency of that moment. I move to the next bed. The clue here is more personal. A paperback novel lies face down, its spine creased to save a place. I carefully pick it up. It is a mass-market thriller, and the bookmark is a simple train ticket, the date printed on it now hopelessly faded. The novel is open to page 214. A character in the plot is about to uncover a conspiracy. The irony is as thick as the dust in the air. Did the reader ever find out what happened next? Or did their own real-life emergency eclipse the fictional one? It is a chilling idea, the realization that a life, with its small comforts and routines, could be so suddenly extinguished. But the most telling piece of evidence sits on the third nightstand. It is a small desk calendar, the kind with a tear-off page for each day. It is turned to Tuesday, the 14th of October. The date is circled several times in red ink, with such force that the pen nearly tore through the paper. Beside the circle number is one word, hastily written, tomorrow. What was scheduled for the next day? A discharge? A special visitor? A crucial procedure? This is not just a date. It is a focal point. It is the crux of this whole mystery. The day everything stopped was the day before something important was meant to happen. A cold mug of tea, an abandoned novel, and a circled calendar date. Separately, they are just forgotten items. Together, however, they paint a vivid picture of lives in progress, cut short without warning. These silent witnesses tell a human story, but they fail to explain the event itself. For that, we have to look beyond the ward toward the official papers and government files. We have to find the version of the story the hospital wanted the world to know. Every mystery has two versions. The the story told by the evidence and the story told to the world. To find the latter, I left the quiet of the hospital for the musty silence of the Oakhaven Municipal Archives. After some hours spent scrolling through brittle microfilm and digging in forgotten city files, I found it. It was a slender manila folder containing the formal incident report and a single newspaper clipping. The official story was neat, concise, and conveniently dull. The document, titled Incident Report for Sichuan, cited a cascading failure of the primary sanitation lines and a severe risk of biocontaminant overflow. In short, a catastrophic plumbing and sewage failure. The report stated that due to the imminent health risk, a mandatory evacuation of the Eastern Wing was ordered and executed with remarkable efficiency. The language was sterile and impersonal. It praised the staff for their quick action and concluded that the wing was sealed pending a full structural overhaul, which, due to budget cuts, never happened. The newspaper clipping, a brief article buried on page 9 of the local paper, echoed this version. Sudden pipe failure forces hospital wing evacuation. The headline read. It was a minor story, a small disruption in the city's daily life, quickly reported and just as quickly forgotten. On the surface, the story made perfect sense. It was a plausible, if unexciting, explanation. It wrapped the whole thing up in a neat little bow. But this is where the tidy, official story begins to unravel. A burst pipe would certainly cause chaos. It would require an evacuation. But would it inspire the kind of abject fear that was so tangible in Ward B? A plumbing failure does not explain the palpable dread in the air. People do not flee from a broken pipe as if they are escaping a monster, abandoning everything they own in a split second. The official story explains why they left, but not how they left. The fear was real, and it was disproportionate to a simple equipment malfunction. The report began to feel less like an explanation and more like a carefully constructed wall. This means the real story is still behind it. To get to it, we can no longer rely on paper. We need to find a person. Paperwork and official reports can only tell you so much. They provide a skeleton, but to put flesh and blood on it, you need human memory. Finding her was not easy. It took weeks of cross-referencing old staff lists with public records, but eventually I found a name, Eleanor Vance. She was a registered nurse on duty in the Eastern Wing on October 14th. She now lives in a quiet suburban house with a garden she tends to meticulously. When I first explained why I was there, she was guarded, her eyes holding a shadow of some long-buried fear. But when I mentioned the official report about the sanitation lines, she let out a short, bitter laugh. The plumbing? Is that the story they're still telling? She said, pouring tea with a hand that trembled slightly. It was never about the plumbing. According to Eleanor, the tension in the ward had been building for days, and it was all centered on the patient in bed 4. The bed that was empty, with no personal effects on its nightstand. This patient had been admitted under a special protocol, and their chart was kept separate. The patient was silent, unnervingly so. They never spoke, had no visitors, and just watched the room with vacant, dark eyes. The other patients were afraid of this person. They had complained to the nurses, saying the patient made them feel cold and that they watched them while they slept. Then came the night of the 14th. Eleanor continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. I was at the nurse's station down the hall. I didn't see it, but I heard it. A scream. Not a scream of pain, but of pure, unadulterated terror. It came from Ward B. A second later, one of the other patients came flying out, his face white as a sheet, just babbling nonsense. Before anyone could process what was happening, the head physician, Dr. Alistair Finch, came running down the corridor. His face was a mask of pure desperation. He didn't follow any protocol, Eleanor recalled. He just yelled, "Get out! Now! Get everyone out of the wing! Don't touch anyone, don't take anything. Just go." They were herded out into the night, confused and terrified, just as another team in heavy protective gear went in. Eleanor was never permitted back into the wing. The entire staff was reassigned and told in no uncertain terms to forget what they saw and to stick to the official story if asked. Eleanor's account shatters the clean, official story of a plumbing failure. It was a cover-up, The focus of our investigation has now shifted from a what to a who. Who was the silent patient in bed for? And what happened in that room to provoke a scream of raw horror and a desperate, full-scale evacuation? The truth of Wardby was not going to be found in a dusty archive. It was hidden in the space between the official lie and the witness's fear. The answer, I realized, was that the official report was not a complete lie. It was a brilliant misdirection. It mentioned a biocontaminant risk, and that, it turned out, was the one kernel of truth. The lie was its source. The risk wasn't coming from the pipes, it was coming from bed 4. The patient with no name and no visitors was not a patient in the traditional sense. He was a test subject. By cross-referencing the head physician's name, Dr. Alastair Finch, with declassified government research grants of the period, I found a black-budget project, a virology study funded by a defense contractor, designed to observe the dormant stages of a weaponized, genetically engineered microbe. The man in bed 4 was a human test subject, a volunteer carrying a latent, hyper-infectious biological agent. Ward B was his containment and observation unit, chosen for its relative isolation within the hospital. The staff, including Eleanor, were unwitting wardens, completely unaware of the contagion their patient harbored. Let us reconstruct the night of October 14th. The circled date on the calendar, tomorrow, was the day the research team was scheduled to arrive and move the subject to a secure facility for the next phase of the experiment. But something went wrong. The microbe didn't stay dormant. It activated ahead of schedule. The scream Eleanor heard was not the sound of an attack. It was the cry of the patient in the next bed who witnessed the first signs of onset. We can only imagine what he saw. Not a fever or a cough, but some horrifyingly rapid and visible transformation. A sudden, violent metamorphosis. A biological event erupting into view. It was this monstrous sight that sent him fleeing into the hall, babbling in pure terror. Dr. Finch's reaction was not the panic of an ordinary physician. It was the rehearsed response of a research scientist witnessing a containment breach. His order, "Don't touch anyone, don't take anything," was not about public safety. It was a quarantine command. He had to get the unexposed people out before the airborne agent could spread. The team in protective gear that arrived moments later was not a cleanup crew. It was a specialized retrieval unit sent to secure their asset, or what was left of him, and to sterilize the hot zone. The entire sewage failure story was a masterfully crafted piece of disinformation. It explained the sealed wing, the presence of hazmat-suited crews, and the need for a long-term quarantine, all under a boring, bureaucratic cover. The hospital was presented as a victim of faulty infrastructure, not the site of a catastrophic bioweapon experiment gone wrong. Wardby was not just abandoned. It was contained. Standing again at the entrance to Ward B, the scene within looks different. Now, armed with the truth, the silence is not just the lack of noise. It is the sound of a well-kept secret. The dust is not a sign of neglect, but a marker of successful containment. Every abandoned object, the cold tea, the open book, the circled date, is no longer a mystery, but a relic from the last few moments of blissful ignorance before a secret world of danger tore through. The fabric of the ordinary. The fate of the hospital wing is sealed. The official story of a structural overhaul became a self-fulfilling prophecy. It was never repaired because it was never meant to be. The wing now serves as a silent, permanent monument to the failed experiment, locked away not by chains, but by layers of bureaucracy and the convenient excuse of a lack of funding. It is cheaper and safer to let it rot than to ever attempt a cleanup that might raise unanswerable questions. And what of the people? The other patients of Ward B were evacuated, observed for a short period under the guise of post-trauma monitoring, and then discharged, never knowing they had slept just feet away from a level 4 biological agent. They went on with their lives, left with only the confusing memory of one chaotic night. The staff, like Nurse Eleanor, were scattered and silenced, left with a psychological wound they couldn't name and a story they couldn't tell, the psychic cost of proximity to power. Dr. Alastair Finch, the man at the center of it all, vanished from hospital records. He was likely reassigned to a new post deep within the shadow organization that funded him, his name scrubbed, his work continuing elsewhere. The hospital ward, left behind in a panicked rush, is ultimately more than just a creepy, abandoned place. It is a physical scar, a monument to the grim reality that some secrets are deemed too important to ever see the light of day. The empty beds and dusty floors are a testament to the day an invisible war bled into our world, only to be expertly hidden and denied. And so it waits, its silence a constant, low hum, reminding us that the most terrifying stories are often the ones that are never told. The echoes in this empty hall are not of ghosts, but of the truth waiting in the dark.